Same old man. Game over.
Johnny. You're gonna need a bigger boat. So simple.
I am Iron Man. This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome back to the InSession Film Podcast. I'm Ryan McQuaid.
And I'm Jay Ledbetter.
Wow, it feels like it's been forever since Jay and I have just been here to talk about some good old Wong Kar-wai.
I'm in the mood to pod.
It's about time one of us or both of us were in the mood to pod, to be fair. I mean, we've been juggling schedules around. It's been crazy. I apologize to all of our listeners out there. We also want to apologize for one of our episodes almost getting lost. It was in the can, and we just forgot to tell JD about it, and it was almost gone, and we got it out. It was out of sequence in the order of this series, but it was released, and it kind of was a blessing because we've had some scheduling conflicts. I got sick. Jay's being a dad. He's hashtag dad life.
Yeah, dad scheduling tough.
Dad scheduling. Come on, Jet, help us out, man. But now we're here, and Jay, we're here to talk about a big movie today. This is really big. And no, we're not talking about Super Mario Bros. We're talking about In the Mood for Love. This is kind of what we've been leading up to in this series for a long time to talk about this movie. This is the one. And I personally want to say that it is the one, just like the Spurs got the number one pick.
There you go.
In the NBA draft. I just
want
to say
timestamp this podcast.
We're talking about number ones. So we just in greatness, we got to talk about that a little bit.
I shouted you out on the Fast and Furious podcast. I said, shout out Ryan, number one pick. I'm very happy for y'all.
Yeah.
And the question is, will Victor Wembanyama end up being in the top 5 on the Sight and Sound NBA Top 100?
What it all indicates already is that he's like the top one in the Sight and Sound, like projected like prospects of all time. It seems like from some people. I wouldn't go that far.
Not, but he's up there.
He's up there. I would say
it was ludicrous when they were like, I think Victor Wembanyama might be the number one prospect in any sport ever. I was like, all right.
To be fair, that was just Woj. Yeah, I mean,
he's like the number one NBA insider guy.
Yeah, but he's not he's a guy.
Analyst.
He's not an analyst. He's just the guy that, says a bunch of crap and it breaks stories, but he's not like breaking this all down. You know what I mean?
Really, what he is doing in that moment is trying to get inside his inner circle.
Exactly.
He wants to be.
He's trying to make it. He's trying to make it feel really good for everybody. And hype up this big moment. Also, too, is for a television show, whatnot. But anyway, I think Victor will do. He's in a good spot. Obviously, he's part of the best basketball organization in the modern sports. But I think he's going to do great, and I'm very happy for that. But let's set aside one international sensation for another international sensation.
And very nice transition.
Did you see what I did there? And I'm going to talk today about a film that was, very high on the recent Sight and Sound Best Films of the Decade. Was it 2010s?
No, best film of all time.
I'm sorry, best film of all time. Yes, you're correct. And it was, I was thinking it was like top 5, number 5.
It was top 5. It was just ahead of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Not hyperbole at all. It's In the Mood for Love. It's directed by Wong Kar-wai. It primarily stars Tony Leung and Maggie Chung. The movie, of course, is about two neighbors who form a strong bond after both suspect extramarital activities of their spouses. Jay, this is a big one. It feels like for our audience, maybe we've been putting it off, but we haven't. It's just scheduling issues. We're here to talk about it. So without further ado, I'm kind of curious what you think. Is this a masterpiece?
Yeah, it probably is a masterpiece. I mean, let's just not beat around the bush, I think it's safe to say that this film is a masterpiece. And this is a film that I saw earlier this year for the first time. I saw this on Valentine's Day by myself, on projected on 35 millimeter, and it was truly a special experience. I mean, anytime, it is a little hack to say maybe, and it might even be a little overstated to a certain level, but when you see a truly visually gorgeous film projected on film, it is second to none, in my opinion. And we've got a local theater here that is really committed to projecting movies on film, which I really appreciate. And this film just blew me away when I saw it the first time. I love it from start to finish. Watching it this time, once again, I still love it from start to finish. The structure and editing are absolutely sublime, I think, and very unique from that very first scene when we are dropped blindly into the world of this apartment building where much of the film takes place, with characters we know nothing about and will only get like little breadcrumbs as the film moves forward. And I think that's a very clever way to structure this film, especially a film that is so much about interiority, to put these people on screen the way that they do. I found myself kind of projecting my own history onto these characters, as the feelings that this film exudes are pretty universal, even if the situation maybe isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think this is a very interesting pivot point in Wong's filmography, as for, I would say the first time, he's focusing on more mature, stable characters than he has focused on in the past. While the characters in this film have sort of an exterior life that implies some level of stability, the inner turmoil is every bit as extreme as the characters in his other movies, like Days of Being Wild and Happy Together. And it's also unique because the lack of narration in this film, you really notice, especially having watched all of his films in succession. And I've in my reading, I saw something that kind of posits that the lack of narration is due to the fact that this is entirely a subjective memory from the perspective of Mo Wan's character, which is kind of solidified by those title cards where they say, this film is seen through a foggy window pane, a dusty window pane, blurred and indistinct. And that's a really interesting way to view the movie. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that interpretation of the entire film, but it speaks to the fact that there are many different ways to talk about this film. And it's not an incorrect way to look at the film, because it is so subjective. And this film is shown in this way that hides things in ways that are incredibly effective and lead to that sense of longing. This, more than any of his other films, which are so much about longing, this is the one that really epitomizes that idea. And all that you want over the course of this entire movie is just give each other a little smooch. I mean, just come on, just a little kiss. And we never get it. We never get it. And the question is the fact that their romance never leads to anything long-term or really significant in any sort of romantic way, is that a credit to them as people, or should we frown on that because it is so abundantly clear that there is this flame between these two people? And it's such a complicated relationship at the center of this movie, such a complicated movie thematically, and it's a masterpiece, and a lot of other people think so. I'm not exactly breaking new ground by saying that, but it is worthy of the praise that has been heaped on it, for sure.
Yeah, Jay, I agree with you. This is just straight up right up front. This is a masterpiece. You can say it.
Yeah.
It's okay to say it. When you see one, and you know it when you know it. You know what I mean? I think it's easier. You know this. I think we've talked about this many times before. It's easier to notice a masterpiece from the past than it is to know a present one, I guess you could say, because there's more universality behind it. So if you can agree with that statement, like a sight and sound list, which I'm going to come out and say it, as much as I think this is a masterpiece, number 5 of all time is a little bit too high for my blood.
I mean, I agree.
Those,
I agree.
Those lists are a little bit, but those, I think ultimately those lists are subjective lists then forged together by an algorithm of whatever, of putting them all together. And I think that it's a little, you got to take it with a giant grain of salt.
I'm fascinated by how
I am fascinated by how they put those together.
Lists are put together from the perspective of the Jean Dielman thing is bananas. And I just want to know, were there group chats where they were like,
we got to put this in number 1, right?
It's crazy to me because there was clearly some sort of movement that put that movie at number 1 and some sort of movement that put this movie at number 5.
Well, I think
it was so different than the poll from 10 years ago. It's a fascinating thing.
Well, I think the thing about Jean Dielman or this is when you have more people of color and when you have more women being represented in the films, you know, and on these lists and being the ones contributing the lists, you know what I mean? Then I think that you're going to have maybe more consensus. And that is such a landmark movie for female directors and female cinema. And this is such a landmark movie for, you know, Asian cinema, Wong's career, who is one of the most beloved directors of all time, the modern era, right? Wouldn't you say? From 2000s to now, of the millennium, of its decade, especially international cinema.
I assume this is the highest ranked film of the 21st century on the site.
I think it is. I think it is.
I would be shocked if it isn't.
But, and I think that that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I'm not okay with some of the films that were not included on the list, but you know, they're lists. They're, I think that, you know, they're meant to be changed over time. They'll be changed in 10 years. We'll see probably more films from the last 10 years on that list, not just Get Out, Parasite, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and Moonlight. We'll see more films on that list, and we'll see movies from the last couple of years probably on those lists too, because critics will get younger, and sadly, movies of the past get ignored, or directors of the past get thrown away because they think that, oh, those old white guys, they didn't make any good movies or whatever, or, oh, those eras were bad and they didn't have masterpieces. And I think that over our series, Jay, we've talked about so many wonderful directors of those eras, and we forget about those wonderful times of Alan Pressburger or Billy Wilder or Howard Hawks or all these wonderful directors that came before and after him. But I think that for Wong Kar-wai, this will be a movie that stays on that list and will stay on it for perpetuity. And the reason why it is because it is a universal, simple story. And it's why some of the greatest stories of all time stay on the list, stay on these lists, because they connect with everyone, because this is his most simplest approach. And it's his also most romantic and yet most heartbreaking film. Like you're mentioning, this is about two people that you can attach. Jay, I like what you said there. You're attaching your own sort of backstory and history to these characters about how they got together with their spouse, how they ended up in this apartment, how they moved there. And he gives you a couple of those pieces, but he doesn't give it to you all the way. And he makes the audience have to fill in the blanks, which is great because these characters aren't necessarily telling even just each other, let alone themselves, the truth all the way through, because they don't want to come to the reality of being alone, reality of having to face potential divorce, or face a moment where they're not going to be with anyone and knowing that the idea of being with this person that they're with here, is just, it's just not plausible. It doesn't, for this time period too. It's not modern setting. You know what I mean? It's set in the past, and that's frowned upon. And it's even still frowned upon a lot to this day in where they're from. So I sit there with this, and I watch this film, and I just, it just slowly breaks your heart. And yes, you talk about, you know, romantic gestures, you know, just looks, or the way the camera lingers is the way romance is depicted in here, rather than kissing and embraces of that sort of magnitude. Because I think about the fact that, you know, you mentioned we want to kiss. Our instinct is to always want that. I think for American audiences, we want that because, and we've learned about this, you and I, through doing these director series, about something like the Hays Code. We're allergic to rules being taken away from us or put on so that they can restrict things, sex, violence, you know, alcohol, cigarettes, whatever. And I think that you look at it a lot in, like, you know, classic literature. You look at it a lot in, like, you know, I know this from friends of mine and everything, or of just the novels of somebody like Jane Austen, who, you know, different societies, romance was not expressed through moments of locking lips or sex or anything like those things. In those things, it was simpler hand holdings or longings from afar.
Yeah, but this is almost an
words,
anti-romance.
No,
you know?
it is more. I mean, you're right, because this is, you know, but what I'm saying is that it's taking a lot of that and making it, and not weaponizing it, but using it against the audience, of like the fact that, well, the simple thing that us dummies would say is, okay, well, these two should be in love. It's simple. Bing, bang, boom. Divorce. Move on. Have kids. Have a bundle of them. It's not that simple. It's complicated. Life is complicated. These times are complicated. Other countries are complicated. So when you add that in there, us as an audience, by the end, yes, they've spent a lot of time together. Yes, they've sat and had dinners with each other, but there's contemplations behind that. There's implications. The fact that I love the neighbor characters in this movie because of the fact that they see everything. They're not oblivious to what is going on, but they don't outright say what you're doing is against the law or sacrilegious or anything. It's more like, okay, well, you know, just be careful, you know, and you know, and it's not, it's just kind of guiding them without implicating. It's guiding them without pointing a finger, without criticizing, I think, is the best way to describe it. And I think that that's perfect. But I think ultimately the movie it's beautiful, I think, in doing that. And if I sound like I'm going all over the place, it's because I think the movie emotionally goes all over the place in such a perfect sort of spiraling, epic nature for something just about two people almost at all times sitting across from each other in a room and just having conversations, whether it's at a dinner table, whether it's in each other's apartment, the sneaking around and whatnot. It's almost childlike. But then you get that third act, you get the moments where it's the flash forward sequences and you see the decisions that they've had to make. And it's truly just, and how close they were, right? Because that's how life is, right? You never know exactly, but you're like milliseconds away from seeing that person or whatnot. And it's his, Wong's got everybody on a puppet and he's the puppet master, and he's stringing these characters along over here, right, Jay? And he's stringing the audience along with it, and they're both dancing at the same time. And it's his most effective film of his filmography. It's the most clean of his direction. There's no whiz bam boom, or there's no, you know, sort of slow motion shots or anything really for me at least, it's as clean, as simple, as sort of, it just kind of, I'm going to tell you this story of these two broken souls, and I'm going to deliver it to you right here. Here you go. Here it is. And I think it's incredible. I think these two performances are gold standards of his filmography.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a, this is the signature Wong Kar-wai film, right? I mean, whether you
There's no
consider it
question
your
about it.
favorite, and I don't actually consider it my favorite, my beloved Fallen Angels, as we discussed recently, a movie I know you don't.
No
like
one's perfect
as much
No
as I
one's
do.
perfect.
But it's
It's not like it's a terrible movie. It's just not. I'll give it another go down the road.
I adore it. So you're just gonna stick with your basic Chungking Express and In the Mood for Love top 2, and you know what? You're fine. Whatever. Those are my
and
2
I'll
and 3.
I'll sleep fine.
History will look favorably upon your ranking, probably, but still, I do not.
If
mean
we
to say
agreed
that
on everything, Jay, the world would be what?
It'd be a boring place.
Thank you.
And I don't say that to, turn my nose up at this film whatsoever, because again, I do think it is a complete masterpiece, and it's interesting to consider this his signature, especially visually, because Christopher Doyle, his first mate, basically, the person who defines Wong Kar-wai films as much as anybody else, had to leave this movie in the middle of filmmaking due to scheduling conflicts. And in my reading, it was very interesting to see Wong's response to that. And somebody asked him about it, and he said, you know what? I think it really reinvigorated me as a visual filmmaker. I think I had kind of just started relying on Doyle too much, and losing him made me refocus and gave me this sense of perfectionism that I hadn't had making my films in a long time. And you really see that because this is such a specifically composed film. Wong said that part of his visual aesthetic for this movie was based around the idea of much of the film looking as it would to like a 5-year-old, which is how old Wong would have been at the time when this film takes place. And this is, I think, a more realistic setting than we've seen in some of his other films. And that 5-year-old view of this film is a really fascinating one, because it is about these much more mature people at a much more mature, stable point in their lives. And beyond just kind of these low angles and this kind of blank slate objectivity of the camera itself, you have these images where it will just linger on somebody's hand, or it will just linger on a hallway, or there will be scenes where we will do kind of a back and forth dialogue sequence where the people's heads are just cut off. You can't see them. And it really gives this disorienting sense in the same way that the overall story gives that sense, just by being, like you said, Ryan, our expectation is these people clearly are falling for each other. Why aren't they acting on that? And it's just this repression, refusing to give you what you expect, whether it's visually, whether it's thematically, whether it's in the plot, and especially from an editing perspective. This is one of the craziest edited films I have ever seen in my life. I mean, from a scene basis, it will cut to one scene and you will immediately think they are talking to one person and they will be talking to somebody completely differently. Or in the same scene, we will have a cut from one person in a conversation to the other, and suddenly we cut ahead God knows how many weeks to a completely different conversation. It is incredibly well edited. And I don't know, would some people maybe find it frustrating in the way that it's edited? That might be the case, but for me, I was like levitating with some of the edits in this movie. It was profound in the way that it was going about this, and it does contribute to that final title card where they're talking about seeing things through this dusty window and not really having entire clarity over these memories. And I just think that is one of the most exquisite touches of this film, is the way that it's edited and how its point of view really keeps you on your toes throughout the entire course of the movie.
Yeah, I would say that this is like, if you want to be an editor, this is one of those films up there with probably like anything Thelma makes. You know what I mean?
I don't know though, because it's
no, I mean, you to show you different techniques, to show you what the medium could do.
Yeah.
To push. I mean, yeah, Jay, you have to show a movie like this because you don't want like just conventional sake. You know what I mean? Like you want to be.
You can't say like, watch this, folks. This is how you edit a movie, because this is
no, it's not. But it's also like
it's
also like this will show you. No, it can show you what the power of editing can do to make an all-time great movie. You know what I mean? The trust that a creative behind the camera and behind the lens, and behind the screenplay can allow them, their editor, and say this like, I would show probably like what, I don't know, Goodfellas probably to an editor and be like, this is how you make a lean, mean fighting machine. You know what I mean, of a movie, right? I would say to an editor, watch In the Mood for Love, this is what your impact can be on making a movie an all-time great.
Well, it all comes down to that idea of every Oscar season. It's the question of
most edited.
Is there a difference between most editing and best editing? And here, I think it's kind of those two things meeting together, because
it's kind of mixed. It kind of blends.
Film is about.
Yeah. It's a little bit of like what we talked about last year, I think, with like Everything Everywhere, right? It's like, it's got good editing, but it also has a lot of editing. You know what I mean? And they sort of blend together and they make sense. And that also makes sense because, you're talking about a film that's leaning on this exact movie, damn it.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. And it just, watching this movie and after seeing that one last year, it's like, well,
the best scene in the movie is an homage to this movie.
Exactly. And this movie did all that like 100 times better, because like this movie is
better than Everything Everywhere All at Once. I'm sorry, folks.
I wanted him to say it. I don't want to get roasted. But I mean, it is. But no, I think this too is just like, I love the simplistic nature of showing where they both work, the sort of mundanity behind their, we don't, I love the fact that we don't see really their spouses, the idea of they're sort of faceless figures, that they're Charlie Brown characters, essentially. I mean,
I thought it was really inspired by the caretaker in Muppet Babies, whose face we never see.
Fair. That would make sense. You are the Muppet guy out of all of us. But
where's Kermit? No.
Oh no, where's Kermit? But there he is, guys. For all of our
also, have you ever
listeners.
seen what Kermit's button is? He's wearing the Jimmy Hoffa button.
Oh no, Kermit, big Irishman guy. Who would have known?
Getting those Netflix
solidarity,
swag put
baby,
into good use.
Yeah, there you go. Solidarity indeed. But no, I just think that every decision here is, I mean, Jay, we saw this movie a couple weeks ago, so we've been able to kind of like marinate. This movie's kind of just like seeded in our brains a little bit and grown stuff out of us. And I don't know, just like the way in which they have conversations in the restaurant, the sort of conversations they have with each other outside when they're close, but they're not close enough to touch, or they're not close enough to, I just think about how modern cinema would have them embrace or have a hug or a moment there. And it's sort of just conversations and feelings and thoughts are left, and they're just left there in the streets or left there at the table. and they move on to the next thing. And I think that's kind of just true, because the movie is really, it's not trying to find an answer for either one of these two within these two. They're just trying to, I don't necessarily even think at times they want to be in love with each other. I think they're just lonely. They're just lonely because they've invoked themselves
I
into
think they're
these.
falling in love with each other very, very clearly.
See, I think that you can see that, but I also think too, like, I'm watching it, and the more I've thought about it, I'm like, I don't know how much in love they truly, truly are. I think that it goes back to a little bit to like Happy Together, where yeah, they are in love with one another, but they aren't but just because what they say usually is like the first relationship after you fall in love with somebody isn't going to be like the greatest relationship for you. And I think that it's the distinction that you talked about in Fallen Angels, I talked about in Happy Together, this distinction of not wanting to be alone. It's a through line that comes in, especially here, because this is the closest of all of those, I think, of real romance. But I don't necessarily, and Wong knows that it's not necessarily, and it isn't, and it shouldn't be the thing that they need. What they really need is to either find peace in their life, or and separate and kind of move on and realize that their lives are, they're still very young. They're very young in this movie and everything, and I think it's a duality between the fact that, like, yes, I'm young and I could still want to be with this person, but I've also made this entire life commitment. And you see that when she has her children in the end, and she's made her choice, and she has not thought back to him until she goes there. And yes, memories resurface, but they're just memories. You know what I mean?
Oh, see, I think there's motivation for.
I don't think she's sitting around there waiting for him. You know what I mean? I mean, it's always going to be there. It's what if it's not like it's Scorsese's Age of Innocence, where like that's clearly like by the end of that movie, like go and bang her, Dad. Like, you always wanted to be with her by the end of that movie. You know what I mean? Like he's like, his son's like, I'm going to literally see her this afternoon. You want to come along? Derp, 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 derp. You know what I mean? And it's sad and it's beautiful and everything. And it fits for the mold of those characters. But like here, it's like, well, do you remember if he's still around or not? And she goes, and she's like, no, he's kind of left shortly after you left and whatnot. And she goes, oh, okay. Well, there's that. And she just picks up and,
Well, that might be true of her, but it obviously,
it's not of him.
Based on that ending, yeah, it is not true.
No, he's like, damn it, I'm looking out that window, and I want that, but but also it's again him also saying there in that moment, dude, you can want this, but it's not happening. You know what I mean? That's their dreams.
He is so profoundly. That is going to linger with him for his entire life, and I think that
it does.
Final sequence
sad.
in Cambodia.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is an all-time final scene of a movie, in my opinion, because it obviously ties in with this idea of, whispering secrets into this tree so that no one ever knows about it. It's your deepest desires that you don't want to reveal to the world. It really ties into all that repression. But also what I think it does so effectively is this is a movie very much about context. And in that scene at the end of the film, it recontextualizes the whole movie. This is a movie that has been so much about setting these kind of small, intimate spaces that they have occupied for so much of the film. Suddenly we're in Cambodia in these grand temples, a completely different shift from the urban interiors that we have become accustomed to in this film. And it really gives you this sense of grandiosity. And at first it appears to be kind of this grandiosity of, oh, there's this like spiritual impact that this experience has had on him. And then there's this great shot where we look over the shoulder of a young monk while he's whispering into this wall. And then the context all of a sudden becomes like, in the significant in the context of greater existence, this means nothing. And it's this really fascinating dichotomy about the movie at large. And that final scene I just think is like incredible.
No, I agree.
That
I
is
agree
the
with you, Jay.
culmination of kind of where these two characters are ending up.
You know, when I first watched that final sequence, it's a little jarring. You know what I mean? At first, when
It's crazy. I mean, it is a crazy way to end this movie.
It's a bold choice, Cotton, and we'll see how that plays out. And then and it almost caught me like a whip in, like with the editing and everything. Almost like it threw me like in for a tailspin. And then the movie ended, and I went, okay, I need to go back, and I hadn't done that since oh gosh, the second film that we covered in this series. I have to think back on that one. Anyway, because the endings were, yeah, I know it's been such a long time since we've. I'm gonna look this up while we're, even though Wong Kar. I'm really just.
I got it right here.
He's got it. Hang on.
It's Days of Being Wild was the second one. That's what
Days of Being Wild. Yes.
Days of Being Wild was the second one. As Tears Go By is the first one. Yeah.
Yes. I didn't want to mix them up. Days of Being Wild, because remember that ending being just this kind of jarring experience at the end of it that's separate from what we had just seen towards the end of that film. So I rewound it and went back to that scene and separately watched it, and I mean, it all clicks. And I mean, it's like you're saying, Jay, it's about the truths that we're not willing to tell out loud, that we're willing to take to the grave, no matter how much it hurts our souls, to repress them. And these two are willing to suck down their happiness because the situations that they're in, they're not able to get out of. They're able to suck down, I think, the potential of maybe love and potential of joy, even though that's not guaranteed. It is not guaranteed.
But
that is going to work.
They're so wounded from what they've been through that they're not willing to make themselves vulnerable. And really the most tragic line in the entire movie is when he rents out this new space for them to write their martial arts novels together. And she's very hesitant to go. He kind of doesn't think she'll show up. She does show up. And maybe the first thing she says when she walks through the door is, "We will not be like them." Which to me, that's this like mission statement where she says, we love being together. I think we have a lot in common. I think we are spiritually connected in some way. But we're not going to do what was done to us because that is in some way beneath us, or, that bruise is so tender upon both of us that this is not a desire that we can exercise, that we can go forward with. And for them to knowingly just decide we're going to be miserable for a while together, there's something that is actually very romantic about that idea. And there's also something obviously very tragic about that idea. They are essentially telling each other, we are going to be, the last film was called Happy Together. We are going to be unhappy together for the foreseeable future. And those scenes where they reenact or imagine how interactions
they're going
would
to
occur
break
when
up,
they confront their spouses, those are devastating. And this is one of those movies, I was thinking about it. I was thinking about watching The Tree of Life since I became a dad, and how that movie is completely transformed into something entirely different. And I have only watched this film as a married man. But the difference between watching this movie when you're single and when you're married has to be profoundly, astoundingly different.
Yeah.
And that was one of my biggest takeaways on the second.
We're not even just married, just with a significant other,
whatever, serious relationship, but whatever it may be.
Yeah.
That is those scenes where they are pretending to be each other's cheating spouses are devastating to me.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's that one scene where the editing, probably the most ambitious edit in the entire movie, is when she's eating and she asks, "Do you have a mistress?" And your first thought in that moment is, "Oh my God, she's finally confronting her husband. Wow." And then it cuts to it's just Totally Young. It's the same guy.
They're just acting it out.
They are at once so available to each other, but so unavailable to their spouses. And obviously the spouses are unavailable to them because they are cheating with each other all around the world. But it's a really interesting kind of onion that gets revealed when you start thinking about, oh, I love your purse. Oh, I love this tie. And it's like, oh, it's weird that the gifts that your spouse is getting are very similar to the ones that I was giving, my husband or whatever, or that I was getting from my wife. And those revelations start just kind of layering on top of each other and create this giant mountain of longing that we see in the movie. And it's a special movie. If nothing else, if you can say one thing about this movie, I think it is certainly the most fascinating movie to dissect, because there is this fascinating subjectivity to the way that the film is being told, that it's far more subjective than any of the other films that Wong has made so far. And that does move to all of this context, which is one of the most important things over the course of the entire movie. And you do have those classic Wong-isms, right? The use of time is very important in this film. Obviously, there's those shots with the giant clock in her office, but time weirdly feels different in this film than it does in the other ones. There are times where there are times where people are kind of excited about countdowns or leading to a certain amount of time or leading to some sort of culmination of something. This film, those countdowns to something exciting almost feel like a countdown to the end of a potential beginning. There's this somber sense of aging in this movie where it's like, yes, I have achieved the sort of happiness that I always envisioned when I was young. That has been shattered. Am I getting to the point where that can ever be realized again? Yeah. Which is a different context than we've looked at time in his other films.
Yeah. No, for sure. Well, Jay, we're about the 43-minute mark here. Might as well start doing some wrap-up thoughts here. Because I think we've done good so far. And I don't want us to start not doing good. So any final thoughts you have on In the Mood for Love? Any more final thoughts?
How about the score? I mean, the song that again Wong loves to repeat.
He loves a repeat. He loves a needle drop. Okay.
Loves a needle drop.
You know what?
We have that great
Wong likes to get a song stuck in his head and then get us stuck in it, get the song stuck in our heads.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. You're not wrong. I mean, we've got that with the main theme of the film, and then we've also got it with the Nat King Cole song in this movie, both of which I think are incredibly effective.
Incredible.
And you also have these really slow movements. Wong apparently would play the music for people just to give them a sense of, all right, here's what the scene is going to feel like. I need you to move like this song feels.
Like the behind the scenes sort of stuff. Like you've seen those videos, I assume, and of him directing these two actors. And it's like, man, put that in like an archive somewhere. It's incredible. Like it's a master, and his two, I would say arguably his two biggest stars coming together. And
I would say almost definitely his definitive collaborators as far as actors are concerned. I mean, Tony Leung is magnetic. obviously, and he's
so sexy in this movie. My
and he's
God.
kind of come back, and he's big. Maggie Cheung, again, just absolutely radiant in this movie. She is just one of.
I mean, the other thing, I think the reason why you want them to kiss so much is they're like the two hottest people to ever be on a damn screen. I mean, they're incredible.
Seriously, I mean, we had our movie star draft. To me, Maggie Cheung is like, her filmography might not be as robust as some of the people that we drafted in that, but for me, as far as just pure magnetism and star power, she's right at the top.
Well, I'd say Tony Leung's right up there too. I mean, like, good Lord,
for sure. Yeah.
They both have this thing, and Wong was able to find them in both of them. To be able to command a screen and the attention of an audience, and it not feel forced, but it just feels natural. And he's able to put them in period pieces, modern pieces. He's able to stretch them out as actors and tap into things that you wouldn't feel like you were going to expect. And it kind of, that unexpected nature keeps you wanting more from them.
Yeah.
And I hate saying this because I don't think it's an actor's job is ever effortless, but there is that effortless quality when they're working with Wong Kar-wai, because it's so humanistic and it's so real that you forget that they're two people. You start, two actors. You think of them as two people, these actual characters, and that's a dance between obviously Wong and his brilliance and his crew, but it really is a testament to these two and the culmination of all their work that we've watched up to this point to lead to this. I mean, this is when you've worked with people you've trusted for such a long time. This is like, for better or worse, I'm not trying to say this to start a controversy or anything, but this is like what everyone today, as the time we're recording this, is saying about Scorsese and De Niro. I mean, Scorsese and De Niro and DiCaprio working on Killers of the Flower Moon. If you work with certain people for such a long amount of time, it's very easy to direct them, but it's also very easy to ask them to do things for their characters, for these new roles and everything, because there's so much trust built in. And it's then, if you have that trust built in, then they can focus on the other elements of the film that they don't have to worry about, that they know that these are going to be knocked out of the park. And then those actors have the trust of the person behind the camera to then deliver what they've seen on the page, what they know from their counterpart, and then they're able to deliver something special. I think these two performances, Jay, they're incredibly nuanced and heartbreaking and very tender. They're very tender. Like it's I feel like if they did touch, they break. You know what I mean? They're there's just something so precious about what they're doing here. So
here's a question.
Yeah.
Is this Tony Leung character the same one that was in Days of Being Wild?
I don't think so. I don't know.
Because we're about to talk about his only direct sequel. And he always talks about Days of Being Wild, In the Mood for Love, and 2046 as a trilogy.
I'd have to go back and kind of watch. Right now, I don't know.
Well, there's nothing to watch about the Days of Being Wild. He just gets his stuff
just walking
together,
in and out.
His hair, and walks out of a room.
I mean, maybe, sure, if you wanna. I don't know. Cool, okay. Like that's
just like a little Easter egg.
It's like a little Easter egg, but like maybe for the next one, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but anyway, it's a fantastic movie. We absolutely love it.
So withholding in its filmmaking, and it's really a masterful piece of filmmaking, no doubt about it.
It's fantastic. I know JD's seen it. It's up on. Him and Brendan have talked about this in the past. I don't know what episode that was, but you can find it at InSessionFilm.com. Brendan loves this. JD loves this. We all love this movie. And that's going to be it for this week's episode. If you want to follow us here on YouTube, just like, review, subscribe. Click that subscribe button below. If you're listening on audio, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, all those amazing places. Go to the InSession Film Store. where you can download, you can get our t-shirts, get our mugs, all that wonderful stuff. Patreon.com/InSessionFilm. You can find all of our bonus content that we do over there, all that fun stuff that we'll be doing more stuff over there. The podcast app, the InSession Film app, all in your app store, or you can go to InSessionFilm.com/app, find all that information there. This week on the main show, I think we're going to be doing a catch-up stuff.
Yeah.
So if you've already listened to that, by the time that this review comes out, go ahead and listen to that if you haven't, or if that episode's not out yet, then it's coming. Or if it is already out, listen to it or watch it. There you go. That's how I cover both
Very
bases.
organized here at InSession.
We're very organized here. We're just doing our thing. We will be talking about 2046 on the next one we do this. We'll be doing it very soon. So,
man, I got to put my thoughts together for that one.
We got a long thought process for that one. That will be special. But until then, we'll see you all next time.